The first thing Deputy Leah Morris asked me was whether the charcoal coat hanging beside the mudroom door belonged to me. My son answered before I could. "It does," Eric said. "He wore it to Nora's winter concert. He wears it everywhere." Leah looked at me. She was young enough to be my granddaughter, but her eyes were steady and patient. The camera clipped to the front of her uniform gave off a small green light. "Mr. Dalton?" "The coat is mine," I said, "but I didn't wear it here today." The room went quiet in the peculiar way a family room goes quiet when strangers have been invited into a private wound. My daughter-in-law, Lisa, stood near the kitchen island with both hands around a coffee mug she had not touched. My granddaughter Nora sat at the breakfast table, pale and motionless. Eric stood beside the mudroom bench with a bright blue envelope pinched between two fingers as if it carried a disease. $500 was written across the front in Nora's careful block letters. Beneath the amount were the words, 8th grade orchestra travel fund. Eric had called the police 11 minutes earlier. He had told them his 71-year-old father had stolen money from a 13-year-old girl. My girl. His girl. The same child whose first violin I had bought, whose multiplication tables I had practiced with her at my kitchen table, and whose mother had trusted me to pick her up from school every Wednesday since she was 6. Eric shook the envelope once. "It was in the inside pocket. There is no reasonable explanation for that." "There is at least one," I said. "Please don't do this." His voice softened for the deputy, taking on that mournful patience people use with the confused. "Dad, if you took it without remembering, we can deal with that. But lying makes it worse." That sentence hurt more than the accusation. A thief can defend himself with facts. A confused old man has every fact taken away from him before he speaks. Leah asked what coat I had worn. I pointed through the glass in the front door toward the porch rail, where my tan rain jacket lay folded over the back of a chair. I had taken it off when I arrived because the house was warm from the oven. Eric glanced toward it and then away. "He could have changed coats," he said. "Why would I? I don't know why you do half the things you do lately." Lisa closed her eyes. Nora's chair scraped the floor. She did not raise her voice. She did not point a finger. She simply looked at her father and said, "Grandpa didn't wear that coat today. You carried it in from the garage before breakfast." Eric's face changed. It was not a dramatic change. His mouth stayed in the same straight line. His shoulders did not move. But I had watched that face grow from infancy. I knew the tiny pull near his right eye that appeared when a lie had reached the end of its road. Deputy Morris turned toward him. "You carried the coat in?" "She's mistaken." "I'm not," Nora said. "Honey, you were setting up your science project. You weren't paying attention." "I was paying attention because you told me not to move the coat." Lisa set down her mug. "Eric? It was in the garage from the concert," he said quickly. "I brought it in because Dad was coming. That doesn't mean anything." "It means the coat was in your possession before Mr. Dalton arrived," Leah said. Eric gave a short laugh. "Are we really going to treat a child's comment as evidence?" "At the moment, I'm treating everyone's comment as a statement." The blue envelope remained in his hand. Leah asked him to put it on the counter. He did, though reluctantly. She photographed it where it lay, then photographed the coat, the mudroom door, and the tan jacket on the porch. She asked each of us when we had arrived and where we had been. I had pulled into the driveway at 10:54 that Sunday morning. The security camera over Eric's garage would show me stepping out of my truck in the tan jacket. I had carried a pecan pie in both hands, kissed Nora on the forehead in the entryway, and gone directly to the kitchen. I had never entered the mudroom. The money had last been seen the night before, when Nora counted it at her desk. She was raising funds for a spring orchestra trip to St. Louis. Her school required each student to turn in cash donations in a sealed, labeled envelope on Monday morning. Lisa said she had watched Nora place the envelope in the top drawer of her desk. Eric said he discovered it missing shortly after I arrived. "Why did you search your father's coat?" Leah asked. "Because he was acting strange." "In what way?" "He asked twice what time lunch was." I looked at him. "I asked whether you wanted me at 11 or 11:30 when you called yesterday. You never answered. I arrived at 11. You also wandered toward the mudroom. I went to wash my hands. Your downstairs bathroom is beside it." He pressed his lips together. Lisa stared into the dark surface of her coffee. "The deputy did not arrest me. She did not handcuff me. though Eric had placed my hands in cuffs every time he called me confused. She asked him whether he wanted to make a formal theft complaint. For the first time that morning, he hesitated. "I want the incident documented," he said. "My father has been having memory problems. This is not the first concern." "That's not what I asked." "Then yes, I want it documented as theft." Leah took the blue envelope in a paper evidence sleeve. She told us the matter would be referred to an investigator and that no one was to delete security footage or alter anything connected to the money. Then she asked Nora if she wanted to speak privately. Eric objected. Lisa surprised me by saying, "Let her." They went into the dining room. Through the glass panes of the French doors, I saw Nora's small hands twist in her lap while she spoke. I could not hear a word. Eric paced between the kitchen and the hall. Twice he looked at his phone. Once he looked at me with something I had never expected to see in my only son's eyes. Not anger. Calculation. When Leah left, she took the envelope, but not the coat. She gave me a case number and told me an investigator might call. Eric waited until the patrol car backed out of the driveway before closing the front door. "You embarrassed me in my own home," he said. For a moment, I thought he was speaking to Nora. Then he faced me. "You called the police," I said, "because $500 was missing. And because you wanted witnesses." Lisa whispered his name, but he ignored her. He walked to the sideboard and lifted a black folder I had noticed when I arrived. He set it on the kitchen island and opened it to a page marked with a yellow tab. "This is exactly why we need to put temporary safeguards in place," he said. "No accusations, no drama. You let me handle financial decisions for 90 days, you get evaluated by a specialist, and we keep this out of the company." I looked down at the paper. The first page called itself a family management agreement. The third paragraph granted Eric an irrevocable proxy over every voting share I held in Dalton Home and Garden. The fourth authorized him to negotiate the sale or encumbrance of company real estate without further approval from me. Temporary was not a word used anywhere after the heading. I closed the folder. "You had this prepared before the money went missing." "My attorney prepared it because I'm worried about you." "Your attorney knew you would accuse me of stealing from Nora?" His right eye pulled again. "Those are separate matters." "No," I said. "They are the same matter. I just don't know how yet." I picked up my keys. Nora was standing near the dining room door. Her eyes were wet, but she held her chin the way my wife, Elaine, used to hold hers when fear and courage arrived together. "Grandpa," she said, "I believe you." Eric stepped between us. "That's enough." I wanted to argue. I wanted to take my granddaughter out of that house and put her somewhere. No adult would punish her for telling the truth. But she was 13. Her parents were standing there. And anger would give Eric exactly the picture he wanted. An unstable old man making threats in front of a deputy's departing taillights. So I looked around him and said, "You did the right thing, Nora." Then I took my tan jacket from the porch and drove home. I had lived alone for 3 years by then. Elaine died on a Thursday in March, at 6:17 in the morning, with one hand in mine and the other resting on the quilt her mother made. People tell widowers that grief becomes lighter. That was not my experience. It became more familiar, which is not the same thing. Our house sat 6 miles outside Fairhaven, Ohio, on a rise above a narrow creek. Elaine had planted sugar maples along the drive when Eric was a boy. By the time I returned from his house that Sunday, the leaves had begun turning. Red and gold scattered across the lawn like pieces of a fire no one had bothered to put out. I placed my keys in the blue ceramic bowl beside the door. I hung my tan jacket on its usual peg. Then I stood in the kitchen and looked at the empty chair across the table. "He planned it," I said aloud. Speaking to an empty chair is not madness. Sometimes it is the only honest conversation left in a house. Elaine and I had founded Dalton Home and Garden 42 years earlier with a rented cinder block building and inventory we could barely afford. I knew lumber. She knew people. Customers who came for hinges stayed to ask her how their mothers were doing after surgery. Contractors paid us on time because she remembered the names of their children. By our 30th anniversary, we had 3 stores, 91 employees, and enough land beneath the original Fairhaven location to make developers call every few months. Eric grew up sweeping aisles and riding beside me on delivery runs. He studied business at Ohio State, came home with good ideas, and earned his way upward. I did not hand him the president's office. Elaine and I made him work under 3 managers first. For years, he deserved every promotion. After Elaine died, I stepped back. I kept 52% of the voting shares and remained chairman, but Eric handled daily operations. He renovated the stores, added online ordering, and opened a design center in Ridgeport. I was proud of him. Then the numbers changed. At first, the changes were small enough to explain. Freight costs rose. A wet spring hurt sales. The Ridgeport Design Center required more inventory than planned. Eric always had a reason, and every reason sounded polished. 3 weeks before the accusation, I reviewed the quarterly packet and found payments to a consulting company called Northbridge Development Services. The first was for $42,000. The next was $68,000. Over 18 months, Dalton Home and Garden had paid Northbridge $874,000. I had never heard of the company. The invoices described market analysis, vendor optimization, and strategic positioning. They carried no detail about hours, deliverables, or named consultants. I asked our controller, Martin Bell, for the contract. He told me Eric had it. Eric told me Martin had it. That was when a chill moved through me. In business, 2 people pointing at each other usually means the document does not exist or says something neither wants seen. I asked Eric to postpone a proposed sale of our Fairhaven property until I could review the records. A developer called Pioneer Landing had offered $6,400,000 for the land. Under Eric's plan, our company would sell the property and lease it back for 20 years. The immediate cash would pay down debt from Ridgeport and fund another expansion. The sale required approval from holders of 2/3 of the voting shares. Eric controlled 31%. A group of small family shareholders controlled 17%. I controlled 52%. Without me, the sale could not happen. At least, that was what I believed before I read the proxy in his black folder. My home phone rang at 4:26 that afternoon. "Grandpa?" Nora's voice was barely louder than breath. "Are you all right?" I asked. Dad took my phone. "Then what are you calling from?" "Mom's old phone. It only works on Wi-Fi." I closed my eyes. "I don't want you sneaking or putting yourself in trouble. I have to tell you something." "Are you safe?" "Yes. They're arguing downstairs." I sat at the kitchen table. "All right. Tell me." My science camera was running. Nora had been working for 6 weeks on a project about how different kinds of light affected bean seedlings. I had built her a narrow wooden rack. She placed it along the mudroom wall because the morning sun came through the side window. An old tablet took 1 photograph every 30 seconds from 6 in the morning until noon. What did it record? "Dad, with your coat." My hand tightened around the receiver. "Did you watch it?" "Only part. He came in from the garage with the coat. He stood right in front of the plants and put something blue in the pocket. Then he hung it by the door." I heard a floorboard creak on her end. "Nora, listen to me. Do not confront him. Do not try to take the tablet. Do not lie if your parents ask you a direct question. Is the video saved anywhere else?" "The pictures upload to the shared garden album. You're still in it because you helped me set it up." I remembered accepting the invitation weeks earlier. There were hundreds of photographs of pale green shoots emerging from dark soil. I had commented on the first leaf. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Now put the phone back exactly where you found it. Are you going to show the police?" "I'm going to make sure the truth is protected. That is all you need to worry about. Dad said you might go to jail. Your father said many things today because he was frightened." "Of what?" It was the right question. I did not yet have the answer. "I'm going to find out." Before she hung up, she whispered, "Grandpa, I really did see him carry it in." "I know you did." I opened my laptop and found the shared album. The time-lapse images were there. At 8:41, the mudroom was empty except for the seedling rack and a stripe of sunlight on the floor. At 8:43, Eric appeared through the garage door carrying my charcoal coat over his arm. At 8:44, he stood with his back partly toward the tablet. The next 6 frames showed his right hand inside the coat. Then a corner of blue appeared between his fingers. At 8:46, he pushed the blue envelope into the inner pocket and pressed the coat flat with both palms. In the final frame, before he walked away, his face turned directly toward the tablet. He had not noticed the camera. I downloaded the complete album to 2 separate drives. I did not crop the photographs or change their names. Years of auditing had taught me that evidence is most powerful when no one can accuse you of improving it. Then I called Evelyn Grant. Evelyn had been our corporate attorney for 26 years. She was 64, sharp as broken glass, and one of the few people who never softened her voice when speaking to me after Elaine died. "What happened?" she asked when she heard my tone. I told her. She did not interrupt until I reached the proxy. "Did you sign anything?" "No." "Did you take the folder?" "No." "Good. Send me the photographs, the case number, and every recent communication about the Pioneer sale. Do not call Eric tonight. Nora is in that house, and you will help her best by remaining calm and lawful. If you believe she is in immediate danger, call the police. If not, do not turn her into your investigator. I already told her not to do anything. Then keep that promise." I emailed the files. Evelyn called a digital evidence specialist she used in civil cases and arranged for the shared album to be preserved with its metadata the next morning. "Henry," she said before we ended the call, "why would Eric risk a criminal accusation over $500? I looked at the quarterly packet still sitting on my desk. "Because $6,400,000 is waiting on the other side of my signature." The next morning, a man in a gray suit came to my door at 8:12. He asked if I was Henry James Dalton. When I said yes, he handed me a thick envelope and requested that I acknowledge receipt. Inside was an emergency petition filed in Fairhaven County Probate Court. My son was asking a judge to declare me incompetent. The petition was 43 pages long. It described a man I almost recognized. He was a widower named Henry Dalton. He had recently withdrawn from friends. He repeated questions. He misplaced documents. He resisted sensible business decisions. He had accused loyal employees of hiding records. Most alarming of all, he had taken $500 from his granddaughter's room and concealed it in his coat. My son wrote that I might harm myself, my family, or the company if he was not granted immediate authority over my finances. Attached to the petition was a proposed order naming Eric my emergency guardian. Another page authorized him to exercise my voting shares while the case was pending. The hearing was set for Friday morning. The Pioneer Landing shareholders meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. I called Evelyn before I finished the attachments. She was at my house within 40 minutes. She read the petition at the kitchen table while I made coffee. Neither of us drank. Halfway through, she removed her glasses and placed one finger on a notarized affidavit. "Look at the date," she said. Eric had sworn that every factual statement in his petition was true before a notary at 4:12 on Friday afternoon. The alleged theft occurred Sunday morning. "He signed this 2 days before he found the money," I said. "He may claim the notary dated it incorrectly, or that the final allegations were added later. Would that help him? It would replace one problem with 2 others." She photographed each page and called the court clerk to request the electronic filing history. Then she reached the final attachment, a letter from my family physician, Dr. Peter Kessler. The letter said I had demonstrated increasing forgetfulness, emotional rigidity, and impaired judgment during visits over the previous year. It recommended a comprehensive cognitive evaluation and temporary supervision of complex financial decisions. I read it twice. Peter Kessler had been my doctor for 16 years. At my annual physical in June, I told him I sometimes walked into a room and forgot why. I told him sleep had been poor since Elaine died. He gave me a short memory screening. I remembered every word, drew the clock correctly, and laughed when he asked me to identify a camel. He had said my results were normal for my age. "I want to call him," I said. Not without me listening. His office nurse put us on hold. When Peter came to the phone, he sounded more tired than surprised. "Henry, I'm sorry this is happening. Did you write the letter attached to Eric's petition?" There was a pause. "I wrote a letter recommending a full evaluation because your son reported concerns. Did you say I needed supervision over financial decisions?" "No." Evelyn leaned closer to the phone. "Doctor, do you have your original?" "Yes, it should be in the chart. Please preserve it and all messages requesting it. Do not send us protected records until Mr. Dalton signs the proper release." "I can tell you this," he said. "The language you just read is not mine." I felt something colder than anger settle inside me. Eric had not merely lied about my memory. He had manufactured a medical voice to speak for the lie. By noon, Evelyn had arranged an independent evaluation with a neuropsychologist in Columbus. It would take place Wednesday and last most of the day. She also filed an objection to emergency relief, attached the time-stamped photographs from Nora's science album, and requested that the court preserve the original electronic versions of every attachment Eric submitted. Then she drafted 3 letters. The first went to Eric and his attorney, ordering them to preserve the coat, home camera footage, phones, emails, company records, and every file connected to the accusation and guardianship petition. The second went to the board of Dalton Home and Garden, notifying them that my authority had not been transferred and that I opposed any sale or encumbrance of the Fairhaven property. The third went to Fairhaven Community Bank, where the company kept its operating accounts and credit line. "You're still a personal guarantor on the Ridgeport debt," Evelyn said. "That gives you a legitimate reason to request current lending records." Eric told me the line was down to $600,000. Then let's see whether Eric told the bank the same thing. At 2:05, I tried to log into the company's board portal. My password no longer worked. The reset email went to an address I did not recognize. I called Martin Bell, our controller. He did not answer. 10 minutes later, I received a text. "I'm sorry, Henry. Eric instructed staff not to discuss company matters with you while the competency petition is pending." I showed it to Evelyn. "He's moving fast," she said, "because he knows Friday may be his only chance, or because something else is closing before Monday." That evening, the story escaped the family. One of our store managers called to ask whether I was ill. A supplier left a message saying he hoped the misunderstanding with my granddaughter would be resolved. At 7:30, my younger sister in Kentucky called in tears because Eric had told her I was confused and needed treatment. He had called relatives, board members, and senior employees before I had even been served. He never said directly that I had stolen money. He did not need to. He said there had been an incident involving Nora's fundraiser, and that the family was protecting my dignity. There are lies built from false words, and there are lies built by arranging true words in a dishonest order. The second kind travels farther because decent people repeat it without feeling like liars. I turned off my phone at 9 and sat on the porch beneath a blanket. For the first time since Elaine's funeral, I wished she had not left me alone to handle something. That thought shamed me immediately. She had not chosen to leave. Cancer had made the choice. I could hear her answer anyway. "Do not confuse loneliness with helplessness, Henry." She had said that once when a contractor tried to pressure her after my father died. Elaine believed grief did not erase a person's judgment. It simply made dishonest people more willing to test it. The next morning, Deputy Morris called. She said an investigator named Carlos Vega had been assigned to the complaint. I told her my attorney had preserved images from the science camera and would provide them directly. Leah was quiet for a moment. "Nora told me about the camera," she said. "She didn't know whether it saved anything." "It did. Mr. Dalton, I'm glad you didn't ask her to retrieve the device. She is my granddaughter, not an evidence locker. That distinction matters." By Tuesday afternoon, the digital specialist had collected the shared album, its upload history, and the account records showing the images had been created by Nora's tablet on Sunday morning. Evelyn delivered a copy to Investigator Vega. The photographs did not show Eric entering Nora's bedroom or taking the cash, but they clearly showed him placing a blue object into my coat more than 2 hours before I arrived. Vega asked Eric to provide his garage camera footage. Eric said the camera had malfunctioned Saturday night. The manufacturer's service log showed the device went offline at 8:07 Sunday morning and came back online at 9:03. The science tablet kept taking pictures the entire time. Eric's attorney called the images inconclusive. He said Eric might have found the envelope somewhere else and placed it in my coat temporarily. Eric revised his statement to say he had intended to ask me about it when I arrived but became distracted. That explanation required everyone to forget that he had acted shocked while pulling the envelope from the same pocket 3 hours later. Investigator Vega did not announce conclusions. He collected facts, which is often more frightening to a liar than accusation. On Wednesday, Evelyn drove me to Columbus for the cognitive evaluation. The clinic occupied the 4th floor of a medical building that smelled of lemon cleaner and old magazines. A psychologist named Dr. Miriam Rowe asked me questions for nearly 5 hours. I repeated lists of words. I connected numbered dots. I copied geometric shapes. I named as many animals as I could in 1 minute. I sorted cards according to rules that changed without warning. She asked about Elaine, sleep, alcohol, medication, anger, and whether I had ever gotten lost while driving. Some tasks were easy. Others made me feel every one of my 71 years. During lunch, I sat in the parking lot with Evelyn and ate half a turkey sandwich. "What if I fail?" I asked. She did not offer false comfort. "Then we deal honestly with whatever the results show." Eric would still have planted the money, yes. A person can need help and still know he is being betrayed, yes. That mattered to me. I did not want to win by pretending age could never touch me. My hands were slower than they had been. Names sometimes hovered beyond reach. I kept a paper calendar because it served me better than my phone. None of that made me available for theft. Dr. Rowe called us back at 4. She said the full written report would take a day, but her preliminary results showed no dementia, no mild cognitive impairment, and no deficit affecting financial judgment. My processing speed was average for my age. My verbal reasoning was well above average. "You do show symptoms of prolonged grief and disrupted sleep," she said. "Those deserve care. They do not justify guardianship." On the drive home, I watched fields pass beneath a gray sky. I had not realized how tightly fear had been tied around my chest until it loosened. Evelyn kept both hands on the wheel. "You know what I dislike most about these cases?" she asked. "The families? The assumption that competence belongs only to the young. I have met 30-year-olds who should not choose a sandwich without supervision." I laughed for the first time since Sunday. When we reached Fairhaven, my daughter-in-law was waiting in a booth at Miller's Diner. Lisa had called Evelyn, not me. She wanted a witness to the conversation. She wore blue hospital scrubs beneath a long cardigan and looked as if she had not slept. A glass of iced tea sat untouched in front of her. "Eric thinks I'm working a double shift," she said. "Are you afraid of him?" I asked. "Not that he'll hit me." She looked toward the window. "I'm afraid of what happens when he decides a person is in his way." Evelyn slid into the booth beside me. "Tell us only what you know firsthand. Don't access his devices. Take documents that aren't yours, or put Nora in the middle." Lisa nodded. "I brought my own bank statements and messages sent to me." She opened a cloth tote and removed a folder. For months, Eric had told her Dalton Home and Garden faced a temporary cash shortage caused by the Ridgeport expansion. He reduced his salary on paper and asked Lisa to cover household expenses from savings. In August, he withdrew $87,000 from the college account they had established for Nora. He said it was a short-term loan to the company. The transfer did not go to Dalton Home and Garden. It went to Northbridge Development Services. "I asked him what Northbridge was," Lisa said. "He told me it belonged to a turnaround expert who was protecting the company. He made me feel guilty for questioning him." "Did you authorize the withdrawal?" Evelyn asked. "The account required both signatures. That is mine on the form, but I didn't sign it." She pushed the statement across the table. I knew Lisa's signature. The copy looked close from a distance, but the final arose in a narrow loop she never made. "Why did you believe I was confused?" I asked. Her face reddened. "Eric said you left the stove on. He said you paid the electric bill 3 times. He showed me messages where you asked the same question over and over. Did you see any of those things yourself?" "No." "Then why did you let him call the police?" She met my eyes. "Because I saw the envelope come out of your coat. And because believing my husband felt less frightening than admitting he might do that to his own father." It was not an apology, but it was honest. "What changed?" I asked. "Nora's sentence." I watched his face when she said he carried in the coat. Then he told her she had to say she was mistaken. He took her phone and said she had betrayed the family. My anger rose, but I kept my voice low. "Has he hurt her?" "No, but she is scared. I took her to my sister's house last night. Eric thinks she is there because we need space." "Good." Lisa pulled up a message on her phone. It was from Eric, sent Friday at 3:38 in the afternoon. "Sunday needs to go exactly as discussed. Keep Dad at the house until we have a record. The hearing is Friday, and after that, this nightmare is finished." Lisa had replied, "What record? What are you talking about?" Eric answered, "A clear incident. Don't worry, no one gets hurt." "I thought he meant he wanted you to repeat yourself in front of people," Lisa said. "He invited Martin and 2 board members to brunch, but they canceled." When the money disappeared, I understood. "Why didn't you stop him?" Tears filled her eyes. "Because by then the police were already coming, and I was a coward." There are moments when forgiveness is too large a word and cruelty is too easy a response. I looked at a woman who had failed me and had finally decided not to fail her daughter. "You can still do the next right thing," I said. She covered her mouth and cried without sound. Evelyn copied the message thread and the bank records with Lisa's written permission. Then she asked about the Pioneer sale. Lisa knew only that Eric had been meeting a man named Mason Pike late at night. Mason was Eric's college roommate. He ran a small real estate brokerage in Dayton and had visited the house twice that month. Northbridge Development Services was registered to Mason Pike. Eric said the land sale would fix everything, Lisa told us. He said once the money arrived, he could put back what he borrowed before anyone noticed. "How much did he borrow?" I asked. He never told me. "Did he say when the money was arriving?" Friday. Evelyn and I looked at each other. The shareholders' vote was Monday. No legitimate sale proceeds should arrive 3 days earlier. The next morning we met Janice Monroe, Senior Vice President at Fairhaven Community Bank. I had known Janice since she was a teller. Her hair was silver now, and she ran the commercial lending division with the careful calm of someone who had survived 3 recessions. Because I remained guarantor and majority shareholder, she could discuss obligations bearing my name. What she showed us explained Eric's urgency. The company's revolving line was not $600,000. It was drawn to $2,180,000. The bank file included a written consent, supposedly signed by me in June, approving an increase of $1,400,000. My signature appeared above my typed name. I had not signed it. The document also listed Northbridge as a permitted restructuring advisor. A separate disbursement schedule for the property transaction directed $1,100,000 of the expected proceeds to Northbridge as a success and settlement fee. "Has the sale been approved?" Evelyn asked. Janice's expression tightened. "We received a certificate from the corporate secretary stating all required approvals had been obtained. Closing is scheduled in escrow tomorrow, subject to release after the shareholder ratification." "Who signed the certificate?" "Martin Bell." I thought of the controller's apologetic text. "And the wire to Northbridge?" I asked. "It is scheduled to fund at closing." Eric had arranged the money to move before the vote that authorized it. If the probate judge gave him control of my shares Friday morning, he could ratify the sale Monday. By then, more than $1 million would be inside his friend's company. The $500 in Nora's blue envelope had never been about money. It had been the cheapest part of $1 million plan. Janice placed both palms on the conference table. "I can suspend the wire because the authority and signatures are disputed," she said. "I cannot decide whether fraud occurred. I will need written notice from counsel and documentation of your current voting rights." Evelyn already had both. Within an hour, the bank froze any extraordinary disbursement connected to the sale. The title company postponed escrow. Pioneer Landing sent a formal demand for proof of corporate approval. At 12:17, Eric called me. I let it ring twice before answering. "What did you do?" he asked. "I told the bank I did not sign a document carrying my name." "You just put 91 people's jobs at risk. If those jobs depend on a forged consent, they were already at risk. This is why I filed the petition. You don't understand what you're interfering with." "Then explain Northbridge." Silence. "You've been digging through things you can't understand," he said. $874,000 in consulting payments is not difficult to understand. Neither is a $1.1 million success fee. Mason found the buyer. He helped restructure debt. "Where is the contract?" "At the office." "Where are the reports?" "At the office." "Where is the board approval?" His breathing grew louder. "You always did this," he said. "You sat behind a desk and asked questions while everyone else carried the weight." I looked through my kitchen window toward the maples Elaine had planted. "If a question feels heavy, Eric, the answer usually is..." He hung up. That afternoon, Evelyn filed an emergency request to block any change in corporate control until the probate hearing. She did not ask the court to decide the property sale. She asked only that my son not be permitted to use an untested incompetency claim to manufacture a vote. The judge signed a temporary status quo order at 4:40. At 5:15, every employee at Dalton Home and Garden received an email from Eric. It said the company's founder, suffering from grief-related cognitive decline, had interfered with critical financing. It warned that payroll and benefits might be affected. It asked employees to respect the family's privacy and pray for my recovery. My name appeared 3 times. The forged signatures did not appear at all. The next morning, someone painted thief across the mailbox at the end of my drive. The letters were red and uneven. I stood there with a bucket and scrub brush until my neighbor, Sam Pritchard, walked over from across the road. Sam was 76 and had worked in our lumber yard for 29 years. His knees no longer allowed him to lift much, but he still came in every December to help with inventory. "Leave it," he said. "I don't intend to." He took the second brush from the bucket. "Then move over." We scrubbed in silence. When the paint had faded to a pink shadow, he sat on the ditch bank to catch his breath. "People at the store are scared," he said. "I know. Eric told them you blocked the only deal that can save the company. Did he tell them $1 million was going to his college roommate?" Sam's eyes narrowed. "No. There is more I can't discuss yet. I am not trying to close the company." "You planning to fire your boy?" The question landed differently from the legal language. Majority shareholder, corporate officer, fiduciary duty. Those words made decisions sound mechanical. Sam called him my boy. "I am planning to learn the truth," I said. "Sometimes that answer is yes with a coat on." He rose slowly, squeezed my shoulder, and carried the bucket toward the house. Martin Bell came to see me that evening. He parked half a mile away and walked along the creek path because he did not want Eric to know. That choice told me something before he spoke. Innocent men do not always behave bravely, but guilty men are rarely so careful without a reason. Martin had served as company controller for 9 years. He was 58, soft-spoken, and precise. Elaine trusted him because he once drove 40 miles back to a vendor after discovering they had overpaid us by $90. Now he sat at my kitchen table with sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. "I signed the secretary's certificate," he said. "You are not the corporate secretary. Eric appointed me acting secretary at a meeting that never happened. And you signed anyway." He stared at his hands. "Yes." Evelyn was on speakerphone. She had told him at the beginning that she represented me and the company's interests as authorized by its majority owner, not him personally. She advised him to obtain his own lawyer. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Because Eric says Henry will be removed Friday and everything will be fixed. I don't believe him anymore." "When did you begin believing him?" I asked. Martin took a long breath. The Ridgeport Design Center had never met projections. Eric concealed the losses by shifting unpaid supplier invoices into later quarters and inflating the value of slow-moving inventory. When interest rates rose, the company began violating its loan covenants. Eric said disclosure would cause the bank to call the line and force layoffs. Northbridge appeared soon afterward. Mason Pike submitted consulting invoices. Some described meetings that never occurred. Others billed for reports copied from public market studies. Eric ordered Martin to approve them as part of a confidential turnaround program. "I told myself it was temporary," Martin said. "I told myself the land sale would cover the line and correct the books." "You told yourself that while you signed my name?" His head lifted. "I didn't forge your signature." "Who did?" "Eric brought me the consent already signed, and you knew it wasn't mine." "I suspected." "You knew." He looked down again. Martin had brought no company documents. Evelyn had warned him not to remove records. Instead, he gave us a list of accounting folders, transaction dates, and server locations the independent auditor should preserve. He identified a monthly entry called Vendor Support Accrual that Eric used to conceal Northbridge payments until quarter end. "There is also a second set of cash forecasts," he said. "The board receives one. Eric keeps another in a private folder." "How bad is the real forecast?" I asked. "Without the land sale, we breach the line again in 6 weeks. Can the company survive? If Ridgeport is sold or closed, if the Northbridge payments stop, and if the bank gives us time, yes. But it will hurt." I thought of the employees who had received Eric's email. Cashiers saving for retirement, yard workers with children, managers who had built their lives around the belief that our family would not gamble with theirs. "Why did $1.1 million have to go to Northbridge?" I asked. Martin's face tightened. "I never saw a contract supporting that fee." I asked Eric twice. The second time, he said if the deal failed, I would be the person the bank blamed for false reporting. "He was preparing you to take the fall. I know that now." Before he left, Martin said one more thing. Eric asked me whether a criminal complaint against you would trigger the incapacity clause in the shareholder agreement. What did you tell him? That a complaint is not a conviction and dishonesty is not incapacity. He said he didn't need the clause. He only needed enough pressure to make you sign the proxy. The guardianship petition had been insurance. Eric expected the accusation, the police, and public humiliation to frighten me into surrendering my vote at the kitchen island. When I refused, he moved to court. I slept poorly that night. At 1:30 in the morning, I walked into the room that had been Elaine's sewing room. Her machine still stood beneath the window. I had not moved the boxes of fabric stacked along the wall. On the highest shelf was a red tin containing spare buttons, old keys, and things she considered too useful to discard. I took it down and found a small brass name tag from our first store. Elaine Dalton, co-owner. Not wife of the owner, not bookkeeper, co-owner. When we first applied for a business loan, a banker directed every question to me, even though Elaine had built the projections. She waited until he finished, closed the folder, and said we would take our business to a bank that could recognize both owners of it. We did. I held the name tag and understood something I should have known earlier. Protecting the company did not mean protecting the person carrying my last name. It meant protecting the work, the people, and the promises that gave the name value. At 9:10 Thursday morning, Evelyn received the court's electronic filing records. The first version of Eric's petition had been uploaded Friday at 4:36, after he signed the notarized verification. It included a paragraph stating that I had recently taken cash belonging to a family member, but the family had avoided law enforcement to spare me embarrassment. On Sunday at 2:21, less than 3 hours after Deputy Morris left his house, Eric's attorney replaced that paragraph with the exact allegation involving Nora's $500 and attached the police incident number. The underlying claim had existed before the event. Only the details changed. Dr. Kessler sent his original letter with my authorization. It recommended evaluation because of concerns reported by Eric, but it also stated that my office screening was normal and that the doctor had made no finding of incapacity. The version filed in court removed both sentences and added the recommendation for temporary financial supervision. The clinic's document system showed the original had been emailed to Eric as a locked PDF. Someone had rebuilt it on different letterhead. By Thursday afternoon, the probate case was no longer a disagreement about an old man's memory. It was a record of manufactured evidence. Eric came to my house after dark. I saw his headlights move between the maples and called Evelyn before opening the door. She told me not to discuss evidence and to end the conversation if he became threatening. My porch camera was already operating. He wore no coat. The wind had risen, and his white shirt pulled tight against his arms. "You need to undo the bank hold tonight," he said. "Good evening to you, too. If the sale doesn't fund, Pioneer walks. If Pioneer walks, the bank calls the line. You think you're saving the company, but you're killing it. Come inside and sit down. I don't want coffee." "Neither do I." He entered, but remained standing in the living room. His eyes moved across the photographs on the mantel. Elaine and me at the first store, Eric in his Little League uniform, Nora at age 5 holding a garden hose with both hands. "Call Janice," he said. "Not until an independent audit establishes where the money went. There is no time for an audit." There was time to plant an envelope. His face went still. "Nora's camera," I said. "It recorded you." For 3 seconds, he looked like the boy who used to stand in this room with a broken lamp behind him. Then the boy disappeared. "You involved my daughter in a corporate dispute. You used her money to stage a crime. It was my money. I replaced the fundraiser cash Saturday night because she had misplaced some receipts." "Then why report it stolen?" "I needed you to understand how vulnerable you are. You needed me frightened." He walked to the window. "Do you know what it is like to run that company with everyone comparing me to you? Every supplier says, 'Your dad would have done it this way.' Every employee tells a story about how Henry remembered a birthday or covered a hospital bill. You got to become a legend because Mom handled everything ugly. Your mother handled many things I should have carried with her." He turned, surprised by the admission. "But she never planted evidence," I continued. "She never forged a signature. She never took Nora's college money." His eyes sharpened. "Lisa talked to you. She showed me her own records. She has no idea what she's doing. That is what you say about every person who notices what you do." He paced once across the rug. I made aggressive decisions. Yes. Ridgeport went wrong. Northbridge bought us time. The land sale repairs all of it. After 1.1 million goes to Mason. That fee settles obligations. Whose obligations? He did not answer. How much of the company's money came back to you? I asked. None. The answer came too quickly. Then open the books. You'll misread them and create panic. The panic began when you decided the truth was more dangerous than fraud. His voice dropped. If you fight me tomorrow, Nora will remember you as the man who sent her father to prison. If you go to prison, it will be because of what you did, not because I named it. You would really do that to your own son? I stood. My knees hurt from the long evaluation the day before, but my voice was steady. You called the police and asked them to take your father over $500 you put in his coat. Do not stand in my wife's house and lecture me about blood. He looked toward the hallway leading to the room where he had slept as a child. For one moment, his anger broke. Beneath it, I saw exhaustion and fear. I can still fix this, he said. Then tell the truth tomorrow. You know I can't. No. You mean you won't. He left without another word. The probate courtroom on Friday morning was smaller than I expected. There were no marble columns or jury box, only dark wood, fluorescent lights, and rows of benches polished by generations of worried families. Eric sat with his attorney, Randall Shaw, at the opposite table. Lisa sat behind Evelyn and me. Nora was not there. Evelyn had insisted that the child should not be pulled into open court unless the judge believed her testimony essential. Deputy Morris's recorded interview and the authenticated photographs spoke for her. Judge Helen Ward entered at 9. She was in her late 50s and had the calm expression of a person who had heard many families explain why control was love. Randall began by describing urgency. He cited my grief, alleged memory lapses, financial interference, and the police complaint. He said the altered date on the affidavit was a clerical error, and the photographs showed only that Eric handled my coat, not that he planted stolen money. Then Evelyn stood. She did not call Eric cruel. She did not tell the judge what kind of father I had tried to be. Courts are not built to measure a lifetime in Sunday dinners and school concerts. She gave the judge records. Dr. Rowe's report found me fully capable of managing financial and personal decisions. Dr. Kessler's original letter contradicted the altered version. The court's own filing history showed an allegation of family cash theft drafted before Sunday. Nora's time-lapse images showed Eric placing a blue object in my coat before I arrived. The police records showed that he later claimed surprise upon finding it. Finally, Evelyn laid the disputed bank consent beside examples of my verified signature. Mr. Dalton is not asking this court to decide the corporate fraud issues today, she said. He asks only that his son not receive emergency power through evidence that appears to have been created for that purpose. Judge Ward looked at Eric. Mr. Dalton, did you place a blue envelope in your father's coat Sunday morning? Randall put a hand on Eric's arm. My client invokes his right not to answer because of the pending investigation. The judge's expression did not change. That is his right. It does not require this court to ignore the evidence before it. She denied the emergency petition. She ordered that I retain full control of my property and voting rights. She also directed the clerk to preserve the filings and send copies of the disputed medical letter and notarized verification to the county prosecutor. Then she said something I carried with me long after the legal language faded. Concern for an aging parent may justify questions. It does not justify manufacturing the answers. Eric did not look at me when we left. On the courthouse steps, reporters from 2 local stations waited beside their cameras. Someone had tipped them off about the founder of Dalton Home and Garden fighting, a competency case. Randall guided Eric toward a side entrance. I could have held up the time-lapse photograph. I could have told the town my son had framed me. Instead, I gave one statement. The court confirmed that I remain capable of managing my affairs. Our company's employees and customers deserve accurate information, and an independent review will provide it. I will not discuss my granddaughter. Then I walked away. Quiet is not the same as surrender. Sometimes quiet is where you keep the facts until they are strong enough to stand without you. The court ruling stopped Eric from taking my shares. It did not repair the company, clear my name in the break room, or make a frightened payroll disappear. By Friday afternoon, 3 vendors had placed us on credit hold. Pioneer Landing threatened to sue for interference with its purchase agreement. The bank agreed not to call the line for 30 days, but only if we hired an independent restructuring accountant and stopped all payments to Northbridge. I called an emergency board meeting for Saturday morning. Dalton Home and Garden had 5 directors. Eric and I held 2 seats. Diane Reeves, Elaine's younger sister, held 1. The other 2 belonged to Samuel Ortiz, a retired bank president, and Grace Hahn, who ran a regional nursery chain. All 3 had received Eric's email about my supposed decline. We met in the conference room above the Fairhaven store. I arrived early and stood at the window overlooking the sales floor. The first aisle still held the hand-painted signs Elaine made when printed signs cost more than we could spare. Household hardware, fasteners, garden tools. The lettering was imperfect. I had resisted every suggestion to replace it. At 9, Eric entered with Randall Shaw and set his briefcase at the head of the table. "That is the chairman's seat," I said. He looked at me for a long moment, then moved 1 chair to the left. I did not begin with the coat. I began with cash. Payroll would clear the following Thursday. After that, without vendor cooperation or a revised bank agreement, the company faced a serious shortage. I showed the board the real line balance, the Northbridge payments, the disputed consent, and Martin's description of the second cash forecast. Eric objected to nearly every page. He called the records preliminary. He said Martin was protecting himself. He said Northbridge had performed valuable work that could not be reduced to timesheets. When Grace asked for a single completed report, he promised to provide one after the meeting. "You've had 18 months, she said. "I'm not giving you another afternoon." Samuel asked the question I had been waiting for. "Did Henry sign the credit line consent?" Eric looked at Randall. "On advice of counsel, I am not discussing disputed signatures while an investigation is open." "Then, did the board approve the increase?" Samuel asked. "The company needed liquidity." "That is not an answer." Eric pushed back from the table. "You are all letting a family quarrel destroy a transaction that saves this business." Diane had been silent until then. She placed Nora's time-lapse photograph beside the bank consent. "Did you put that envelope in Henry's coat?" she asked. "This meeting is about the company." The petition asked for his company vote. "That makes the coat company business," Randall whispered to Eric. I proposed 3 motions. First, hire Carver Forensic Accounting to conduct an independent review. Second, suspend Eric as president with pay while the review was pending. Third, appoint Grace interim chief executive and authorize her to negotiate a short-term standstill with the bank. Eric voted no. Samuel, Grace, Diane, and I voted yes. My son closed his briefcase slowly. "You think a 4-to-1 vote makes you right?" he asked. "No," I said. "The records will decide that. When this company collapses, every person downstairs will know who caused it." Grace leaned forward. "The employees downstairs already know who asked them to work. They deserve to know who took the money." Eric left his office key on the table. Building security disabled his access card while he watched. I had imagined that moment during the sleepless hours before dawn. In imagination, I felt relief. In the room, I felt only sorrow. I remembered the first key I ever gave him. He was 16. I let him open the store on Saturday mornings, and he wore that responsibility like a medal. He used to arrive 20 minutes early so the coffee would be ready for the yard crew. No parent raises a child expecting to one day vote him out of the room he helped build. After the meeting, I walked onto the sales floor. Employees pretended not to watch me. The rumor had moved faster than any formal announcement. At the paint counter, a cashier named Tasha Green came around the register. She had worked for us for 12 years. "Are we getting paid Thursday?" she asked. "Yes." "And after Thursday?" "I intend to keep this company operating. I will not promise there will be no changes, because that would be dishonest. An independent team starts Monday. We will share verified information as soon as we can." "Did you take Nora's money?" The question came from somewhere behind the key-cutting machine. No one laughed. I turned toward the voice. A young stock clerk lowered his eyes. "No," I said. "Evidence now in police custody shows the envelope was placed in my coat before I arrived. My granddaughter told the truth. She is a child, and I will not discuss her further." Tasha nodded once. "That's enough for me. It was not enough for everyone. Trust does not return on command." But several shoulders relaxed, and that was a beginning. Carver Forensic Accounting took over the second-floor training room on Monday. Denise Carver was a small woman in her 60s with close-cropped white hair and the unnerving habit of wading through silence until people filled it. Her team imaged servers, preserved email accounts, and reconciled 18 months of payments. Martin returned with a lawyer and answered questions. He resigned as controller the same day. Grace kept him on paid administrative leave long enough to complete the review, then accepted his resignation. Cooperation did not erase what he signed, but truth told late is still more useful than a lie maintained forever. The first week produced bad news. Ridgeport had lost $1,300,000 more than the board had been told. Inventory was overstated by $640,000. Supplier invoices totaling $400,000 were past due. If we closed Ridgeport immediately, termination costs and lease penalties would create another blow. The second week produced worse news. Northbridge had no employees besides Mason Pike. Its invoices were created from the same template and often submitted minutes after Eric approved them. 4 purported reports were copies of studies available free from county development websites. One invoice billed us $36,000 for a 3-day strategy retreat at a hotel that had been closed for renovation that month. Denise found an unsigned version of the $1.1 million success agreement in Eric's private folder. Its metadata showed Eric created it, not Mason. A signature image resembling mine was embedded in a hidden layer but had not yet been placed on the final page. He was preparing another consent, Denise said. I stared at the screen. After he had my proxy, my signature would no longer matter. Perhaps. But people who begin forging authority tend to keep a spare forgery nearby. The third week brought an answer to Eric's repeated claim that Northbridge had saved the company. It had not. Of the $874,000 paid to Northbridge, Denise could document legitimate services worth at most $28,000. The rest left the company without any measurable benefit. Where it went required legal process. Evelyn filed a civil action on behalf of Dalton Home and Garden, seeking an accounting and return of the funds. The court issued a temporary order preventing Northbridge from moving money. Mason hired a lawyer and, within 48 hours, offered to cooperate. He met us in Evelyn's office on a rainy Tuesday. Mason Pike had once been the loud young man who slept on our couch during college holidays and called Elaine's lasagna the best food in Ohio. At 44, he wore a tailored suit and the exhausted look of someone who had spent years running ahead of a bill. His lawyer did most of the talking. Northbridge had transferred $312,000 to Eater Holdings, a limited liability company owned by Eric. Another $240,000 paid interest and penalties on a private real estate loan that Eric and Mason had guaranteed. $180,000 went toward deposits on parcels next to the Fairhaven store. Eric and Mason had expected to assemble those parcels quietly, then sell the combined land to Pioneer Landing at a substantial profit. When 2 owners refused to sell, the side venture collapsed. The private lender demanded repayment. Eric began using company money disguised as consulting fees to keep the lender away from his personal assets. Why the $1 million success fee? I asked. Mason's lawyer answered. It would have repaid the remaining private obligation and restored funds Mr. Pike believed were due to him. Due for what? Mason spoke then. For taking the risk. I looked at him. You took money from 91 people's workplace and call that your risk? He rubbed his forehead. Eric said the property sale was inevitable. He said you were sentimental and he could get around you. Did he tell you how? Not at first. And later? Mason's eyes moved toward his lawyer. She gave a small nod. He said he was documenting cognitive problems, Mason replied. He said once he had control, he could approve everything and no one would question the fee. Did he mention $500? He said there would be a family incident strong enough for court. The room seemed to narrow. When did he say that? Evelyn asked. Thursday night. 3 days before the police call. Mason signed a sworn statement and provided Northbridge's bank records. In exchange, the company agreed only to consider his cooperation when resolving the civil claim. No one promised protection from criminal charges. That decision belonged to the prosecutor. By then, the county investigation had expanded beyond a false report. Investigator Vega and a financial crimes detective interviewed me, Lisa, Martin, Dr. Kessler, Janice, and Mason. They collected Eric's company laptop pursuant to a warrant. His attorney stopped returning public statements. Eric blamed me anyway. He sent one message to the family group chat before Lisa blocked him. Dad would rather hand the company to strangers than admit his own son made one mistake. Diane answered before anyone else. One mistake does not require 43 pages, a forged doctor's letter, and a child's coat rack. No one added another word. During those weeks, I saw Nora only twice. Lisa and she stayed with Lisa's sister in a neighboring county. Lisa filed for a legal separation and obtained a temporary custody order after Eric sent Nora messages demanding that she correct her police statement. He never threatened violence, but he told her that families who loved each other kept private matters private. The sentence sounded respectable until you understood that he meant children should carry adults' lies. Our first visit took place in a public park near her school. Lisa sat on a bench 50 yards away while Nora and I walked around a pond. October wind pushed small waves against the stones. Nora wore her orchestra sweatshirt and kept both hands in its front pocket. "Dad says the store might close because of me," she said. "The store is in trouble because adults made dishonest decisions. If I hadn't said anything, you might have signed the paper." That would not have saved the store. It would have hidden the hole until it was deeper. She kicked a brown leaf from the path. "Mom says I was brave. You were. I don't feel brave. Most brave people don't. They feel afraid and tell the truth before fear gives permission." She stopped beside the pond. "Did I destroy our family?" I had rehearsed an answer, but rehearsed answers are often too polished for a child's pain. "No," I said. "Your father damaged our family when he used your trust to hurt someone. You showed us where the damage was. Showing a broken place is not the same as breaking it." Tears moved down her cheeks. I held out my arms, and she came into them. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Before we returned to Lisa, Nora asked whether I hated her father. "No. How can you not? Because hate would make him the owner of whatever time I have left. I won't give him that too." That answer was true, but incomplete. I loved Eric. Love does not disappear when a person becomes guilty. Sometimes it becomes heavier because it can no longer be used as a reason to rescue him from the truth. At the company, survival required choices that gave no one satisfaction. We negotiated with the landlord in Ridgeport to surrender half the design center space. A competing kitchen company bought display equipment and assumed part of the lease. 14 positions were eliminated, but we found openings at the other stores for 9 employees. 5 received severance funded by selling 2 company vehicles and canceling executive bonuses. Grace and I met every affected employee face to face. One man cursed me. One woman cried. A designer named Kayla thanked us for telling her directly, and then asked why the family had been paid bonuses while the store lost money. I had no answer that made the unfairness smaller. I returned every director's fee I had received that year. Diane and Samuel did the same. Grace declined additional compensation as interim president until the bank agreement was signed. The bank extended the line for 12 months after Denise corrected the statements, and we pledged proceeds from the Ridgeport downsizing. Vendors accepted payment plans. The company would survive if holiday sales were steady and no new losses appeared. We did not sell the Fairhaven property. Pioneer Landing threatened litigation, but its agreement depended on valid corporate approval. Once its lawyers saw the disputed certificate and the pending fraud investigation, they withdrew with a carefully worded statement about changing market conditions. On the morning the bank signed the standstill agreement, I drove to the cemetery. Elaine's stone was damp from overnight rain. I cleared leaves from its base and placed her brass co-owner tag on top. "We kept the store," I told her. "Not all of it. Not the way it was. But enough." A groundskeeper's mower moved in the distance. The world did not pause for my conversation. "I lost our boy somewhere," I said. That was the sentence I had avoided. I had asked where the money went, when the document changed, how the code arrived, and who approved the wire. Facts answered each question. They could not tell me when ambition became permission, or when Eric decided his father's dignity was acceptable collateral. Perhaps there was no single moment. Character can erode like riverbank, an inch at a time, until a tree that looked solid falls in one night. I left the brass tag on the stone for an hour, then put it back in my pocket. Elaine would have called littering an inadequate tribute. 2 days later, Investigator Vega asked me to come to the sheriff's office. The $500 had been released from evidence after photographs and fingerprints were taken. No usable prints besides family members were recovered. That no longer mattered. The time-lapse record and Eric's changing statements had established the sequence. Vega placed the blue envelope on the desk between us. Mrs. Dalton replaced the school money from her account, he said. This cash legally belongs to her and Nora unless the court later orders otherwise. What happens to Eric? The prosecutor will decide charges. I can tell you the investigation is active. I turned the envelope over. Nora had drawn a tiny violin beside her name. The seal had been cut open when police counted the bills, then closed with evidence tape. He chose this because it was exactly $500, I said. Why does that matter? Large enough to sound serious. Small enough that he thought no one would examine it closely. Vega nodded. People often make that mistake. I took the envelope to Lisa. She did not want the money. Give it to the orchestra, she said. That decision should be Nora's. Nora chose to establish a small emergency fund for students who could not afford instrument repairs. The school accepted it after confirming the money was no longer evidence. She asked that no family name appear on the fund. Someone who needs a violin string shouldn't have to know all this, she said. Elaine would have liked that answer. 5 weeks after the accusation, Denise presented her final report to the board and shareholders. We held the meeting after store hours in the old lumber warehouse because the training room was too small. Folding chairs filled the concrete floor. Family shareholders sat in the first rows. Department managers stood along the back wall. Eric had the right to attend as a shareholder and director unless removed by formal vote. He arrived with Randall and sat alone at the end of the front row. I had not seen him since court. He looked thinner. Gray showed at his temples where I had not noticed it before. For one dangerous second, pity made me remember only the child with the Saturday key. Then Denise put the first forged consent on the screen. Fax returned the whole man to the room. Denise spoke for 52 minutes. She did not use words like betrayal or greed. She showed dates, approvals, account numbers, and the movement of cash. She traced the first Northbridge invoice from Eric's email to Martin's approval queue. She displayed the 4 copied reports beside their public originals. She showed the line increase carrying my disputed signature and the secret cash forecast that predicted a covenant breach months before the board learned of it. Then she showed a diagram of where the Northbridge money went. $312,000 entered Eater Holdings. $240,000 serviced Eric and Mason's private real estate debt. $180,000 purchased options on land that never became part of the company. Additional payments covered legal fees, travel, and interest unrelated to Dalton Home and Garden. The company had received $28,000 in supportable services. It had paid $874,000. The proposed success fee would have increased the unsupported total to nearly $2 million. When Denise finished, Samuel asked whether the company could recover the money. Some, she said. Northbridge has approximately $140,000 currently frozen. Eater Holdings owns a condominium and a partial interest in 2 parcels. Recovery depends on court orders, lender priority, insurance coverage, and the criminal case. You should not budget for all of it. Grace asked whether any evidence showed I had approved the arrangement verbally. None, Denise said. Every board packet omitted Northbridge's related party character. Mr. Henry Dalton repeatedly requested the underlying contract. Those requests were redirected or unanswered. Randall rose and objected that the meeting was not a courtroom. You're right, Diane said. In a courtroom, your client would be under oath. Eric stood. He did not look defeated. He looked offended that the room had allowed numbers to speak longer than he had. I will not pretend every decision was perfect, he said. Ridgeport put us under pressure. Mason and I used an unconventional structure to assemble land that would increase the sale value. The strategy failed. That is business risk, not theft. Denise folded her hands. Business risk is disclosed to the people whose money is at risk. You were hired by my father. I was hired by a 4-to-1 vote of the board. Eric faced the shareholders. Ask yourselves why we are here. My father never wanted the land sold. He would rather preserve a hand-painted sign than accept what the market is offering. When I found a way forward, he searched for reasons to stop me. You found those reasons yourself, Grace said. He ignored her. This company needs modern leadership. It cannot survive as a memorial to my mother. The mention of Elaine changed the air. I rose from my chair. You are right about one thing, I said. A business cannot survive as a memorial. It must make money, adapt, and be honest about failure. Your mother understood that better than either of us." Eric laughed under his breath. "Here comes the sermon." "No, here comes my part." I looked at the managers along the wall and the relatives in the first rows. I stepped back too quickly after Elaine died. I wanted Eric to succeed, and I wanted relief from decisions that reminded me she was gone. When the reports grew thin and the explanations grew polished, I accepted them longer than a chairman should have. My grief did not make me incompetent. It did make me absent. The board should hold me responsible for that. No one moved. But my failure to look sooner did not authorize anyone to forge my name. It did not turn company money into private money, and it did not put $500 in my coat. Eric's face hardened. "You want to make this about Nora because it makes you look like the wounded grandfather." I did not bring her image into this room. I did not show her interview. I will say only what the police evidence establishes. The envelope was placed in my coat before I arrived, and the person who reported finding it had placed it there. "You turned my daughter against me." Lisa stood from a chair near the aisle. "No," she said. "You told her to deny what she saw. She chose not to." Eric looked at his wife as if he had forgotten she might have a voice in public. "You have no idea what Dad is capable of," he said. Lisa's hands trembled, but she did not sit. "I know what you were capable of Sunday morning." Randall touched Eric's sleeve and urged him quietly to stop. Eric pulled away. "All of you took from me," he said. "Dad took the company. Mom took the credit for making it kind. Lisa took Nora. Martin took the records. And now you sit here acting as if I woke up one morning and decided to become a criminal." I heard pain in his words. Pain is real even when the story built around it is false. "No one wakes up as the person he becomes," I said. "We get there by choices. You still have one in front of you." "Which choice is that?" "Tell the truth without asking what it buys you." For the first time all evening, he had nothing to say. The shareholders voted to remove him from the board for cause. My 52% was enough. But I was not the only vote. Every shareholder except Eric supported the motion. The board then terminated his employment and authorized the civil claims needed to recover company property. We also voted to accept responsibility for governance failures, amend the bylaws, and add 2 independent directors with financial oversight experience. No family member would again approve related party transactions alone. Extraordinary borrowing would require direct verification from each signing director. Rules do not create honest people. They make dishonest choices harder to hide. When the meeting ended, employees moved chairs toward the wall. Shareholders gathered around Denise with questions. Eric remained in the front row until the warehouse was nearly empty. I approached him but stopped several feet away. "Do you need a ride?" I asked. It was an ordinary father's question, and I regretted it as soon as I saw his face. "You took my car with the company," he said. "The sedan belongs to the company. I can call someone." "Stop pretending you care what happens to me." "I care. That is not the same as undoing tonight. You chose the store over your son. I chose 91 families over your secret debt. I chose Nora over the lie you put in her room. I chose my own name over the signature you copied. You made all of those choices necessary." He stood and walked past me. Randall drove him home. The local newspaper published Denise's principal findings the next morning. The article also reported that the guardianship petition had been denied and that police evidence contradicted the theft accusation. It did not use Nora's name because Evelyn had asked the editor to protect her privacy. Some people who had repeated Eric's version called to apologize. Others simply began speaking to me again as if the red word had never been painted on my mailbox. I learned not to demand regret from everyone. A person can spend the rest of his life knocking on doors where gossip entered and never recover the hours. I accepted sincere apologies. I ignored the silence of those who offered none. Sam Pritchard came by with a new mailbox. "The old one still works," I told him. "It leans." It leaned before the paint. Then we should have fixed it before. We installed the new one on a cold Saturday morning. He set the post straight while I mixed concrete. Neither of us said what the task represented. Men our age are sometimes more comfortable repairing a thing than naming why it matters. One question still troubled me. The $500 was planned. The medical letter was altered. But what about the smaller stories Eric had told Lisa and the court? The stove left burning. The electric bill paid 3 times. The repeated messages. Had he invented them? Or had ordinary mistakes given him material? I needed to know for a reason deeper than court. After someone attacks your memory, every forgotten name becomes an accusation. I would stand in the pantry, unable to remember whether I needed salt or coffee, and hear Eric's voice saying, "You don't remember." I began checking the stove twice. Then I worried that checking twice proved something. Dr. Rowe warned me this could happen. Being accused of impairment makes people monitor normal lapses until normal feels pathological, she said during a follow-up call. Use systems that support you, but do not turn your life into a test you must pass every hour. So I approached the stories as an auditor, not a frightened patient. My electric account showed 3 payments in July. 1 was my scheduled bank draft. 2 were made manually online within 6 minutes of each other. The utility provided device records after I verified the account. Both manual payments came from an internet address assigned to Eric's house. He still had access because he helped me set up automatic billing after Elaine died. The payments had been reversed the next morning, so I never lost money. Eric had shown Lisa a screenshot before the reversals appeared. The stove story came from a Sunday in August when Eric stopped by while I was in the garden. He later told Lisa he found a burner on beneath an empty pan. My kitchen had a propane range with no electronic log, so the event could not be disproved. But the photograph he sent her contained a detail neither of them noticed. The pan was a red enamel skillet with a chipped white handle. It belonged to Lisa. She had brought it to my house that morning with a breakfast casserole and taken it home after lunch. I had never used it. Eric had been alone in the kitchen while I cut tomatoes outside. The repeated messages were simpler. Eric showed Lisa 3 screenshots in which I appeared to ask, "What time is the board meeting?" Each carried a different timestamp. On my phone, only one message existed. The other 2 screenshots cropped away small arrows indicating that Eric had forwarded my original message back to himself. Denise's review of his company phone backup found all 3 images in a folder labeled Dad Timeline. There were entries beneath them. June. Doctor visit. Reports sleep issues. July. Duplicate utility payments. August. Stove. September. Board questions/confusion over Northbridge. October. Family cash incident. He had not reacted to my decline. He had written a decline and arranged scenes to illustrate it. Evelyn sent the evidence to the prosecutor. I printed no copy for myself. I had spent enough hours looking at the version of me my son tried to manufacture. The night before Thanksgiving, Lisa called and asked if she and Nora could come to my house. For 41 years, Thanksgiving had been Elaine's holiday. She made cornbread dressing with sage, orange peel, and enough butter to concern every physician in the county. After she died, Eric took over hosting because I could not enter the kitchen without seeing her at the counter. That year, his house stood dark. His lawyers had advised him to avoid contact with witnesses, and Lisa's temporary order limited communication with Nora. "You don't have to cook," Lisa said. "We can bring everything." I looked at Elaine's recipe box on top of the refrigerator. "Come at noon," I said. Diane joined us. So did Sam, whose children were visiting their mother's family in Arizona. I roasted a turkey that finished 40 minutes early and made dressing from Elaine's handwritten card. The first batch came out too dry. Nora stood beside me, crushed more cornbread, and added broth until it looked right. "Grandma never measured this part," I said. "That seems irresponsible." She called it instinct. That's what people say when they don't want to write instructions. At 2, we sat around the same table where I had read the guardianship petition. Eric's chair was empty. No one said grace immediately. In our family, Eric had done it since he was 15. He always thanked God for food, work, and the people unable to join us. Finally, Lisa reached for Nora's hand. "Henry, would you?" she asked. I bowed my head. I gave thanks for the meal, for those who prepared it, for work that still needed doing, and for the courage to tell the truth with kindness. I prayed for people absent because of distance, death, and choices none of us could undo. I did not say Eric's name. I did not need to. During dessert, Lisa asked if she could speak with me privately. We stepped onto the enclosed porch. Cold wind pressed leaves against the screens. "I owe you an apology," she said. "You told the truth when it mattered." After I stayed silent when it mattered. I waited. When Eric pulled out the envelope, "I saw your face," she continued. "Part of me knew you hadn't taken it. But if I said that, I had to ask why my husband wanted the police there. I chose the explanation that demanded less from me. Most dangerous lies offer that bargain. I am sorry. This time it was an apology. I forgive you, I said. Her shoulders fell. How can you say it that quickly? Quickly? I've been working on it for 6 weeks. She laughed through tears. Forgiveness doesn't mean I would ignore the same silence again, I told her. It means I believe you are doing differently now. Through the window, we watched Nora show Sam how to tune a violin. He turned a peg too far, and she grabbed the instrument with both hands. She wakes up some nights, Lisa said. She dreams that the police take you and everyone says it was her fault. Dr. Rowe gave me the name of a counselor who works with children in court-involved families. If you want, I will pay directly through the office so there is no argument about marital funds. Lisa nodded. Thank you. I did not offer to repair every part of their new life. Help becomes control when it leaves the other person no room to choose. I could pay for counseling, carry boxes, and keep my door open. Lisa had to build the rest. Before they left, Nora placed a container of dressing in my refrigerator and wrote Thursday on the lid. So you don't forget, she said, then froze as if the words might hurt me. I smiled. That is what labels are for. She studied my face, saw that I meant it, and smiled back. Memory aids were not evidence against my dignity. That was another thing Eric's lie had tried to steal. I reclaimed it with a piece of tape and my granddaughter's handwriting. The criminal charges came in December. The prosecutor presented evidence to a grand jury. Eric was indicted on charges involving aggravated theft, forgery, tampering with records, falsification, and making a false police report. Mason faced theft and conspiracy charges. Martin was charged with falsifying corporate records, though the prosecutor noted his cooperation. Eric surrendered through his attorney. There were no sirens and no handcuffs on his front lawn. He walked through a side door of the county jail at 7 in the morning, was processed, and appeared before a judge by video that afternoon. He posted bond secured by his remaining interest in the condominium held through Eder. The television station used a photograph of him cutting the ribbon at the Ridgeport Design Center. Behind him, barely visible, I was clapping. I turned off the screen. Lisa asked whether I would help pay his defense fees. I said no. The company's insurance covered counsel for actions taken in good faith as an officer, not an alleged scheme for personal benefit. My personal money would not be used to attack the witnesses who told the truth. He says a public defender will make him plead guilty, she said. Eric owns assets. He can sell them. He says those are for Nora. He already used Nora's future once. He does not get to use it again. Lisa nodded. By then she understood that a boundary can sound harsh and still be the first safe thing in a room. She and Nora rented a small house near the middle school after the court granted temporary support. I helped carry boxes but did not pay the deposit until Lisa and her attorney confirmed it would not complicate the marital accounts. Evelyn had trained all of us to respect paperwork. Nora's new bedroom was half the size of her old one. She placed the seedling rack beneath the window. "Are you going to use a camera again?" I asked. She gave me a sideways look. "Maybe one that only photographs plants. Plants cause less trouble. You've never met poison ivy." Her ability to joke felt like a window opening. Eric sent her letters through a court-approved family counselor. In the first, he said he was sorry that business problems had frightened her. He did not admit planting the money. He wrote that adults sometimes made complicated choices children could not understand. Nora returned the letter unopened after the counselor read that sentence aloud. "He still thinks the problem is that I'm 13, she told me. "You do not owe anyone an answer before you are ready." Do you answer him? Eric had sent me letters too. Most began with a request. Pay Randall. Ask the board to withdraw the civil case. Tell the prosecutor the guardianship filing was a family misunderstanding. Sell enough land to cover restitution, and he might avoid prison. I answer through lawyers when an answer is required, I said. Do you miss him? Every day. She studied my face. Even now? Especially now. Missing the person he was is part of accepting the person he became. In January, Eric asked to meet me with a mediator. The meeting took place at his attorney's office. Evelyn sat beside me. Eric wore a gray sweater instead of a suit. Without the office, car, and title, he looked younger and older at once. Randall explained that prosecutors had offered a plea agreement. If Eric accepted responsibility, surrendered his interest in Eder, assisted in recovering funds from Northbridge, and pleaded guilty to several charges, the state would recommend a prison term lower than the maximum. If he went to trial, the altered medical letter, time-lapse images, bank transfers, and Mason's testimony would all be presented publicly. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Eric leaned forward. "The company can characterize the Northbridge payments as unauthorized loans instead of theft. You can say, 'I intended repayment.'" "Did you?" "The land sale would have put everything back. After it paid your personal lender. Eventually. That is not repayment. That is hoping the next transaction hides the last one." He looked at Evelyn. "Can I talk to my father without counsel answering every sentence?" "She has not answered any," I said. "You know what Mom would have done." The room went very still. "Your mother would have sat beside you while you told the truth," I said. "She would have loved you. She would not have called a forged signature alone. You don't know that. I knew her for 46 years. His eyes filled, and he turned toward the window. "I was drowning," he said. "Then why didn't you call me?" "Because you would have said no." "To stealing company money?" "Yes. To Ridgeport. To Mason's parcels. To every decision that could make me more than the caretaker of your old store." I let the words settle. "I may have made you feel that nothing you built would ever be enough," I said. "If I did, I am sorry." He turned back. Hope appeared in his face, as if my apology were a door out of the charges. "But feeling unseen did not move the money," I continued. "Feeling compared did not edit Peter's letter. Pain can explain where a choice began. It cannot make the choice belong to someone else." His hope vanished. "Then why come?" "Because you asked me. Because you are my son. And because I wanted you to hear that, I will tell the truth about all of you if a judge asks. I will say you worked hard for years. I will say you helped grow the online business. I will say you took care of your mother during chemotherapy when I was too frightened to sleep. I will also say you framed me and stole from the company. You won't ask for mercy? I will not ask for cruelty. I will not lie in either direction." He covered his face with both hands. For several minutes, the only sound in the room was the heating vent. "Nora hates me," he said. "She is hurt and afraid. Can you tell her I'm sorry? Write an apology that contains no explanation and no request. The counselor will decide when she should see it." "What am I supposed to say?" "Say what you did." That was the hardest instruction I gave him. He accepted the plea agreement 2 weeks later. At the hearing, he admitted under oath that he authorized false invoices, used company funds for private obligations, submitted altered documents, and placed the fundraiser envelope in my coat to pressure me into surrendering voting authority. His voice broke when he reached Nora's name. The judge asked why $500. "Because I thought it was enough to scare him and not enough for anyone to investigate," Eric said. Investigator Vega had understood him exactly. The court ordered restitution and imposed a prison sentence of 4 years, with credit governed by state rules and later supervision. Mason received a shorter sentence after returning assets and cooperating. Martin received probation, community service, and a professional ban from serving as a corporate officer during the supervision period. I did not celebrate any of it. Consequences are necessary, but they are not confetti. When Eric was led from the courtroom, he looked back once. I raised my hand. Not a wave. Not forgiveness performed for the people watching. Just a sign that I saw him. He gave a small nod. The civil recovery took most of the next year. Northbridge's frozen funds returned to the company. Eder's condominium was sold. Insurance covered part of the forged transfer loss after extensive review. We recovered a little over $600,000 in total. It was not everything. Honest repairs rarely restore the exact shape that existed before damage. The business improved slowly. Grace accepted the permanent presidency after the board conducted an external search and found she was still the strongest candidate. She closed the remaining Ridgeport showroom, moved its design operation into unused space at Fairhaven, and rebuilt supplier credit one conversation at a time. I stepped down as chairman on my 72nd birthday. I kept one board seat for a year and placed 15% of my non-voting ownership into an employee benefit trust. The plan did not make every employee wealthy. It gave them a share of annual profits and a voice in major changes. After what had happened, voice mattered to me. We restored Elaine's hand-painted aisle signs. We also installed a modern inventory system, proving memory and change could live in the same building. The winter concert arrived on a Tuesday in February. The sheriff's office had returned my charcoal coat months earlier, but I left it in a garment bag at the back of my closet. Every time I saw it, I remembered Eric's hand inside the pocket and the blue envelope on the counter. That afternoon, I took the coat out. It was an ordinary wool coat Elaine bought during a January sale 12 years before. One brass button was loose. I carried it into her sewing room, found matching thread in the red tin, and repaired the button the way she had shown me. Then I put it on. The coat did not belong to the lie. It belonged to me. Nora's orchestra performed in the same auditorium where I had left the coat after the concert the previous year. Lisa had saved me a seat on the aisle. When Nora walked onto the stage with her violin, she spotted us in the third row. Her eyes dropped to the charcoal collar. For a moment she looked startled. Then she smiled. The orchestra played a simple arrangement of Dvorak. The first notes were unsteady. By the middle, the violins found one another and the sound grew full enough to lift into the high ceiling. I thought about families and music. Both require people to listen while carrying separate parts. One person cannot force harmony by playing louder. And when someone loses the rhythm, love does not mean pretending the wrong note was right. It means leaving open the possibility that, with work and honesty, the person may one day return to the piece. After the concert, Nora came down the aisle and touched my sleeve. "You wore it," she said. "I did. Does it feel weird?" "A little." She considered that. "You could buy a new one." "I could? But you don't want Dad to take this too." I looked at her. Children sometimes reach the truth by a road adults spend months avoiding. "That's part of it." She slipped her arm through mine. Lisa joined us, and we walked toward the lobby where parents held flowers and students posed for pictures. Outside, snow had begun falling in soft, dry flakes. It gathered on the shoulders of my coat without melting. Eric wrote Nora a second apology from prison that spring. This one began, "I put your money in Grandpa's coat, and then I asked you to doubt what you saw. You told the truth. I punished you for it. That was wrong. There was no but. There was no request for a visit." Nora read it twice. She did not answer immediately. A month later, she sent him a photograph of the orchestra repair fund's first receipt. It had paid to replace a cracked cello bridge for a student whose mother could not afford it. On the back, Nora wrote one sentence. "I'm not ready to see you, but I hope you keep telling the truth." I drove her to the post office. She placed the envelope in the slot herself. "Do you think he'll change?" she asked as we returned to the truck. "I don't know. You always say people can change. Can is not the same as will. Do you hope he does?" I opened the passenger door for her. Every day. That summer, the store held a customer appreciation picnic on the Fairhaven property. Children painted flower pots beneath a striped tent. Retired employees sat in the shade and corrected one another's stories. Grace announced that the company had posted its first clean, profitable quarter in 2 years. No one gave a speech about my name being cleared. I was grateful for that. Public vindication is loud in stories. In life, dignity often returns through ordinary things. A cashier asks whether you want your usual coffee. A neighbor waves from his tractor. A granddaughter leaves her violin on your kitchen table because she trusts it will be there when she comes back. Near sunset, I walked behind the warehouse to the patch of ground where the original store had stood. The cinder block building was gone, but one section of its foundation remained beneath the grass. Nora found me there, carrying 2 cups of lemonade. "Mom says you disappeared," she said. "I walked 50 yards. At your age, that counts." I gave her the look she expected, and she laughed. We sat on the low concrete edge. Across the parking lot, the current store glowed in the evening light. Employees were taking down tables. Tasha chased a paper plate rolling in the wind. "Dad says he may get into a work program," Nora said. "That could be good. He wrote that he's learning bookkeeping. That may be the prison's idea of humor." She laughed again, then grew serious. "Grandpa, if I hadn't seen the coat, what would have happened?" I had asked myself the same question many nights. Perhaps I would still have refused the proxy. Perhaps Evelyn would have found the notarized date. Perhaps the bank signature would have stopped the sale. Or perhaps shame, doubt, and a son's practiced concern would have pushed me into signing away the authority I had spent a lifetime building. "I don't know," I said. "Your sentence gave the truth somewhere to begin." It was just one sentence. That is often how truth enters a room. She leaned against my shoulder. $500 had been chosen because Eric believed it was small. Small enough to control. Small enough to become a family embarrassment instead of a real investigation. He forgot that the measure of a lie is not the amount written on an envelope. It is what the lie asks other people to surrender. He asked me to surrender my judgment. He asked Lisa to surrender her questions. He asked employees to surrender their trust. And he asked his daughter to surrender what she had seen with her own eyes. She was the youngest person in the room, and the only one he believed he could silence. He was wrong. The sun lowered behind the maple trees at the edge of the property. Their leaves would turn again in a few months. I thought of Elaine planting the first row beside our house and insisting we space them far enough apart. "They look too small," I had told her then. "You're looking at them as they are," she said. "I'm leaving room for what they become." I had spent much of my life believing love meant leaving room for people. I still believed it. But room is not the absence of boundaries. Trees need space, and they also need roots. A family needs mercy, and it also needs truth strong enough to stand in. Nora finished her lemonade and set the cup beside her. "Ready to go?" she asked. "In a minute." We sat until the parking lot lights came on. Then I stood, feeling the honest complaint of my knees, and walked back with my granddaughter toward the people waiting for us.